And so they came out with, the Oakland Institute published a detailed report in February of 23. They titled it War and Theft, the Takeover of Ukraine's Agricultural Land. Now, this exposed how foreign firms have clandestinely taken control of a significant share of Ukrainian farmland. Our media, like USA Today, came out and kind of did a bogus fact check saying, oh, that's not true, but it is. Today, we're going to be discussing the escalation of the war. And I know the question will be which one, but it's basically all of them. But wait until you hear the details. I'm going to connect a few dots to give you some information that you're not getting out of mainstream media. This system is definitely rigged against we the people, and you're going to find out why. And so I want to get into what that means. But before I do, please hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with others. And so today I was kind of a little blown away that, well, I should have known this was going to happen, but they are now passing in the House. Speaker Johnson is going to pass, with the help of Democrats, $95 billion foreign aid package. And this is a big deal because it's going to provide about $60 billion for Ukraine, $26 billion for Israel, and $8 billion for Taiwan. So do you see the angle here setting up? Now, I won't say World War III, but you kind of get the picture here of what's setting up here. $60 billion for Ukraine. We've decided to escalate the war. Now, wait until I tell you a little bit more detail about Ukraine. You're going to be surprised because it's actually our allies that are saying it. But I'm not a fan of that war. I know we started it. It goes back to World War I. Just when many say that Germany started the war, it wasn't. It was actually England that provoked and forced Germany to invade and start it. We did the same thing here. In 2014, it was the United States and NATO that allowed and provoked and instigated the coup in Ukraine. We went in, overthrew the government, and then installed neo-Nazis. I mean, whenever were Nazis okay? And yet we're using them at our behest. And now we are not only putting in the neo-Nazis, we put in all sorts of military equipment and start training them. Now, this is against all the treaties that Russia had with Europe, that NATO would never go east, by the way. They've gone as far as they could, and Ukraine would always remain neutral. Instead, they were secretly training up the armies in Ukraine to get ready. And it wasn't that they were technically going to invade Russia, although it was Ukraine that was terrorizing the Russian people in the eastern half of Ukraine. These are Russian-speaking, Russian passport-carrying people. And just like in World War I, Russia had no choice. They asked for a peace treaty. Even the English prime minister got involved, and this was done with the Putin-Tucker Carlson interview, which if you haven't seen it, you really should. It's about a 2-hour interview. I was a nerd. I watched it 3-4 times. I was astounded at the intelligence of Putin. And I'm not saying Putin's this great guy, but listen, who's the one starting a lot of these wars? And it just so happens to be we in NATO and America. But during that time, they were talking about how this Ukraine territory just had to remain neutral. And all we want is a guarantee. Russia just wanted a guarantee, no military equipment on their border, no weapons on their border. Would we allow weapons on the Canadian border? Would we allow weapons on the Mexican border? No, of course not. But that's what we did to Russia. We basically forced Russia, and we were flying B-52 bomber runs around the border in the north of Russia, around Poland. We forced this to happen. Russia had no choice but to invade. And here we are today. Now, Ukraine is terribly losing that war. And I'm thinking, okay, I get why we're trying to do it. I thought until more details started coming out. Now, there's a 3-pronged issue here. One, they wanted to keep Russia from going to China and forming the BRICS. So ever since the BRICS have come, we have now become a multipolar world. We were a unipolar world where the United States dollar and the United States was supreme. That is no longer the case. We are now a multipolar world where almost 2/3 of the world's population is moving away from NATO and the West. And they're forming their own currency in the BRICS bloc, and they're using commodities and gold to back it up, which is very interesting. So one, we wanted to stop that from happening. Two, we thought we would get in, get this war going, use Ukraine people as a proxy, which I think is outrageous. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. It just seems so evil, but that's another conversation. And then we would wear down Russia. We would destroy their currency. I remember seeing, Sloppy Joe get out and say, yeah, look at the Russian currency. It's collapsing. Well, that lasted about a day, and that currency went right back up. The Russian economy is doing very well, and they have pivoted away from the West. We even blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, hurting our allies, mind you, so they couldn't get the natural gas from Russia, forcing them to buy our very expensive liquid natural gas. So we made sure that our friends and allies couldn't benefit or change their mind. And we tried to bankrupt Russia. Well, instead, they're sending those resources east. They're working with India. They're working with China. And the Russian economy is doing great. They even have a bigger and better military today than they did before the Ukraine war started. Where are we in the West? We're depleted on munitions. It's unbelievable. That didn't work. Talk about backfire. Then we freeze $300 billion of Russian reserves. Now, mind you, that belongs to Russia. And the NATO and United States have been talking about trying to find ways of taking that money away from Russia. Now, that's just flat out illegal. And international law, you just can't do it. But we're trying. That is absolutely acts of war like you can't even imagine. But we're doing everything we can to provoke, and it's not working. And then three, we thought we would get in there, force Russia to collapse their economy, break Russia up into individual regions, keep them from going to China, and then get our corporate goons in there to control the $70 trillion of natural resources that Russia has. See, that's the difference. Russia has unbelievable amount of natural resources. They are very, very wealthy in natural resources, way more than the Americans and way more than definitely more than most of NATO. And none of that has worked. And you saw, not only are you seeing the Ukraine situation collapse, Russia is advancing. Now NATO is saying we're going to send troops, and it's going to be a direct Western NATO war with Russia. Extremely bad idea, and escalation, poking a bear that actually has nuclear weapons. I wouldn't think that's a good idea. They even have hypersonic submarine torpedoes, for Pete's sake. I mean, this is not a good idea. And so then conveniently, as I showed in the last podcast, things that they're not telling us, it almost seems as if the Hamas-Israeli thing was allowed to happen. It was almost as if it was forecasted because the Ukrainian war wasn't going well. So they pivoted to start this deal in Israel. You cannot get into Israel. There's no way you could have attacked Israel like that. I believe, this is my personal opinion, it was allowed to give them the ability to go to war and destroy Hamas and take over that territory. It's not going well. But here we want to escalate that war. You have Yemen down in the peninsula. You have the Israeli Hamas Hezbollah. You have the Ukraine, Russia. You now have Armenia, Azerbaijan, and now you have Taiwan and China. China's getting Taiwan, whether the Americans think so or not. They're going to take Taiwan eventually. Now, that's a problem for the West because the Taiwans basically control the semiconductor chip and microchip type of business for the world. So that is a big deal. But the fact that we are putting this much money towards these wars, escalating these wars instead of trying to talk peace, is just going to annihilate our supply chain. If you think we have problems with inflation now, you haven't even begun to see it, because it's not about the concerns of deflation. We can't have deflation either because the dollar doesn't buy anything. This is about the dollar and what it will allow us to buy. And it doesn't buy us anything because they have printed trillions and trillions of it. Now, this is where I say it's coming into the angle of why we're doing it. Twofold here, and I'm going to get into Ukraine here because the Polish president laid out his reasoning. We're at the end of a cycle in America. I contend it's a fourth turning. We're going one way or the other. We're going Bolshevik, Marxist, socialism, or we the people are going to maintain our freedom, period. And we do not want to go the other angle. If we elect this administration again, you will see taxes increase in such a crazy way. It will destroy they will control everything we do. It will be horrific. And I'm not going to get into those details now, but this is not even a question. They're going to take away our freedom. They're going to take away our currencies. They're going to force us into digital IDs. They're going to censor everything. And they're going to force us into a digital money where they can turn off and program if you become non-compliant, just like the Chinese do with their social credit system. All you got to do is look to Canada, because they're passing laws right now to put your social credit system tied to your bank account. So I see us as an empire at the end of a cycle. And we're trying to hang on to this hegemony, this world dominant control. I don't know if we were just stupid or if we screwed it up on purpose, because we messed this up more than we could have ever messed it up. And if our goal was to be superior, there were so many other ways we could have done it. And we're doing it to the supply chain. Vast majority of our supplies, let alone our pharmaceutical drugs, come from China. And all these people, oh, well, the Chinese need us too. Yeah, well, the Chinese are in war economy. Other nations are in war economy. They're prepping. And I don't think people are just missing the boat here. They're good at two sides of the fence, but at the end, they're done with America. America is becoming isolated. Ever since we sanctioned Russia, we showed the world you can't trust our debt. It has changed drastically. And we've now told China, if they help Russia with this war effort, we will put sanctions on China. And you think China is going to listen? I mean, we sent over Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary, to have a conversation with China. And she tells them, stop making solar panels, which they control 90% of the market, stop making electric vehicles, and stop buying silver. Why would she say that? Because America is running out of silver. Most of our silver came out of Mexico. We couldn't even supply our physical demand. And so we were sending exchange for physical demands out of the futures market for physical silver to London. Well, London was getting most of its physical silver from Russia. Now with sanctions, that is not happening. And most of that is now going to the East. So we've lost our supply of silver and we're losing control. I contend if they don't watch it, we've got about 2 weeks of supply of physical silver industrially in the COMEX. And I contend they probably or could possibly go to a force majeure, which would, of course, destroy our markets, destroy our credibility, but they're going to force people in the industrial side to take these contracts in cash instead of physical silver. The silver is going to the East, and the Chinese don't care. They will dominate these industrial products, and they will take this physical supply off the system. They didn't care what Yellen said. As soon as she left, they basically kicked her to the curb, laughed at her, and then met with Russia the next day. We are no longer respected. We're done on the international stage. Yeah, we may have a decent military, although I don't know with all the wokeness going in the military how effective we are, but we still got some real good military people there. So that's one positive thing for us, but we're on the wrong side of history here. We're in what I call an inflationary depression. And I know you don't believe it because you think everything's okay. The markets look fine, but it's just not. There is a reason the banks are doubling down this year on buying gold. There is no way out of this inflationary depression. No way. The banks are in a damned if you do, damned if you don't moment. They can't raise interest rates. They'll destroy the banking system. They'll collapse the banks. If they lower rates, they'll accelerate inflation. The banks are in a really bad spot because the government have forced the banks to own U.S. treasuries. And remember, we have 10 trillion in U.S. treasuries to reissue this year, 700 billion a month, starting right now in April. Who is going to buy them? Nobody, because they're going to monetize that debt, which if you think inflation's bad now, wait until we start monetizing that debt. That's called basically printing money out of thin air. The trust is eroding all over the world in all things America. Trust in our banking system. Look at New York, what they're doing. Look at the lawfare. Look at how they're going after President Trump and all these outrageous claims. Would you do business in New York? You couldn't trust them. We're losing the credibility and the excellence of a nation. Our culture is destroyed. I mean, this whole woke queer angle of culture is unbelievable what it's doing to the fabric of we the people. Our politics, our dollar, nobody trusts it anymore. And so here the Polish president came out and revealed that the foreign companies own most of Ukraine's industrial agriculture. Now, this gets to the other part while I say maybe one of the bigger reasons why we liked the idea of the war. So here we're taking hundreds of billions of dollars of American taxpayer money. That would be let's just say $3 billion for every state in our union we could have given to the states, and they could have increased the roads and built the electrical grid up and rebuilt bridges. And can you imagine the jobs and the improvement to our infrastructure we could have done with this money? Instead, we go to war? Well, the Polish president's saying, wait a minute, something's wrong. Foreign companies are coming in, AKA BlackRock and America, and they own all of the Ukrainian grade A farmland. Duda, which is the president of Poland, says that he represents what's widely considered to be one of the most pro-American, anti-Russian governments at any time in history. So he can't really be accused of being a pushing Kremlin propaganda guy. And yet he's coming out, wait a minute, because the Ukrainian grain and farmland is producing far cheaper than the Polish, and they're destroying the Polish farmers. And so they came out with, the Oakland Institute came out and published a detailed report in February of 23. They titled it War and Theft, the Takeover of Ukraine's Agricultural Land. Now, this exposed how foreign firms have clandestinely taken control of a significant share of Ukrainian farmland by exploiting a law of inclusion with local oligarchs. Their findings were made waves around the world, of course, and at the time be eventually receded from the public's attention because our media, like USA Today, came out and kind of did a bogus fact check saying, oh, that's not true, but it is. So we, the people, are taking hundreds of billions of our tax dollars to finance a war we should never have gone to allow these mega corporations to then own the farmland. So they can then give cheaper grains to Europe instead of sending it to Africa. At the same time, the Europeans are going after their farmers by closing them down, shutting them down, saying it's global warming, climate change, whatever word they're using today, and it's fertilizer. And yet they're doing it, I believe, as a World Economic Forum angle, Great Reset angle to control the food. Because Ukraine is one of the breadbaskets of the world. And this is how the World Economic Forum, United Nations, will control the food supply. Then you control the food, you can submit the people. And so Duda came out from Poland and said, wait a minute, this isn't cool. What's going on? And then they turn around and the Speaker of the House just said, oh, yeah, these loans we're giving Ukraine will be forgiven. So we, the taxpayers, instead of redoing our infrastructure and putting it towards we, the people, and our communities and our poor, we're giving it to them. We're making the loans go away, allowing the mega corporations to then take over and control the food supply. Sound like a good angle, huh? For war, we're basically growth by deficit spending. And this is what is known as the end of an empire. When the confidence of a dollar, of a currency, gets lost, that is the seventh stage of a collapse of an empire. And I believe we're on the verge of that right now, as trust is eroding in everything America. We have been tapping now what we call the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And I'm going to get deeper into that at some other time. But basically, it consists of three types of assets: US dollars printed out of thin air, foreign currencies that we're basically taking without permission, and special drawing rights, which basically are international reserve assets created by the International Monetary Fund. Saudi Arabia wants their money back. It's been 6 years, and we've taken it out through this Exchange Stabilization Fund. That's how we've been surviving. We are doing everything we can, taking from places we shouldn't be taking. They've even taken it from the money market system. If you notice, you have, back in the day, a money market account was your currency, your money. It's not money, but currency sitting in a bank for you. But that's not the case. A few years ago, look at every one of your bank statements and brokerage statements. A money market account is now 98% US Treasuries. So they were able to go in and take trillions of dollars out of the money market system. You are now sitting in US Treasuries. And if you trust US bonds and treasuries right now, more power to you. I find it incredibly dangerous. I'd be highly diversifying out of the system. So many people are sitting with money in the banks. They have no idea the bankruptcy laws and what is coming. And if they did, they wouldn't be doing it. The Chinese know. They're on the side of the Russians. They're on the side of the Iranians. India is playing both sides. You are seeing the setup of World War scenario. Now, I don't think it goes kinetic personally. I could see skirmishes, but kinetic makes no sense. This is going to be an infiltration to our culture. That's why Chinese in the fentanyl angle to our communities, promoting the queer angle of destroying our nuclear family in our church. And it's being done as a not just a cloud pivot, but an internal chaos into our culture to destroy us from within. And then financially, we are at that precipice. $10 trillion have to be reissued. Who do you think is going to buy it? They're not. They will monetize it. And if you think it's inflation now, wait. Why? If you think this is expensive, so many people are selling gold and silver right now. It's hilarious. If you sell your silver at 32, you're going to regret it. When silver hits 50, it skyrockets above. You're going to look back and go, oh my gosh, I could have been double, tripling my money. If you want to protect and preserve your assets, you get outside that system with gold and silver in a vault, private depository, through your IRA, and be cautious of these big gold companies. If they got the word gold in their name, 98% of them are going to gouge you like you can't believe and charge you stratospheric level of premiums. Unnecessary to buy numismatic fancy coins, because in the end, 31.1 grams is going to be 31.1 grams. You want to get as many ounces as you can. And that's why I love Cornerstone Asset Metals, because they're here to serve the people's needs and not just be there to take all the money for themselves and profit. And wait until you try to sell those coins back to the big gold companies. They charge you another outrageous premium. Stay away. And if you're going to do it, give Cornerstone a call and start consulting there. But in the meantime, this escalation of war is very real. And to add this much money into the theaters of war on three angles, not counting the Houthis down by Saudi Arabia, and over in the Armenia region as well with Azerbaijani. This is a big deal. The escalation is real. And if you pay attention to world wars, this is how they get started. The chess pieces are getting laid out. Will we have prevailing heads? It doesn't seem so. It seems like we in our Congress are bent on trying to break Russia, which will not happen. And we are going to escalate this. And the question becomes when? Or when does it go too far? And all I know is I would hate to have many of you wake up and not be prepared properly, not have emergency food, not have your debts paid down, not have your community relationships understood. Just be at peace about it. But no, this is not a normal time in history. We are either going to a digital ID, digital currency. Biden signed it into executive action. Trump made it clear he will not allow that to happen. I think our choice is really clear right now. We don't have to like the guy, but we sure in the hell will like his policies. And I know he can do a better job of rebuilding this country and our economy than anyone on the left will do, because they are hell-bent on destroying this system. So until next time, God bless each and every one of you.
With all of the recent changes in the political and financial markets, there has never been a better time than right now to invest in silver and gold. When governments simply print billions of dollars in paper money in hopes of solving financial shortfalls, you know that it is time to buy and hold assets of true and lasting value. Free information is available to you right now by calling 888-747-3309. Whether you are a new investor or you're interested in preserving the value of your retirement accounts, we make it easy for you to make smart decisions for your financial future. The specialists at Cornerstone are here to serve you, work to satisfy your retirement goals, and communicate with respect. Call us right now at 888-747-3309. That's 888-747-3309. Or visit us online at cornerstoneassetmetals.com. That's cornerstoneassetmetals.com.